Fixing up an old house on a budget. No matter what house you have, you're going to want to use a budget. But specifically on an old house, it's even more important because as you open things up, you get into more things. Like I said, this could be a little bit tricky, especially if you get into historical houses, which is a whole nother beast. If you get something that's in the historical district, you'll scare off a lot of hard money lenders in general, because that house has to be held up to a certain standard. And in doing so, there's more expense, and the longer the permit process is in doing so, because everything has to go through a longer review process typically. So you end up scaring off a lot of lenders. That being said, I've done plenty of the historical houses, so I'm going to share with you kind of a blend of what to look for so you don't get stuck holding the bag on one of these. So like I said before, a budget is a budget. You want to be able to accurately figure out what kind of budget you're going to have for this property, because it's either going to work or it doesn't work. So typically in some of the older houses, you're going to have to expose more stuff, like you're opening up drywall. In a lot of cases, older houses plaster. You got the lathing underneath of it, so it just becomes a bigger project, if you will. You have old wiring, so typically what I like to do in some of these older houses is just abandon the old wiring or pull it and put all new wiring in, put new panels in. So you got to factor stuff like that in, new wiring and new plumbing as well. Those are two of my musts that in any house that I go into that's historical, where it's using cast iron plumbing, I just automatically say, let's just figure in a budget. And when I have my people bid it, I have it bid putting all new plumbing in. So I'll do piping, basically PEX or PVC piping versus the old cast iron. Because cast iron over time deteriorates, it breaks. And even if you leave some of it, what you might find is when an inspector comes on the job site, they may make you abandon it and do it over anyway. So you might as well just rip it out and start over. It's just so much cheaper and easier. And listen, I've made the mistake in a multi-million-dollar property of not changing out the plumbing. And within a week after closing, after I sold the property, the cast iron plumbing literally gave way. What a horrible feeling for that new owner. They bought this brand new renovated house, beautiful, and that gave way. It was devastating. So in that case, I ended up, instead of digging up all the hardwoods in the kitchen and everything, I ran this fiberglass sleeve all the way through it and blew it up, as far as pumped it up, so it made a new clear channel. But it's just as expensive, and it caused a mess and an inconvenience. It kind of leaves you with a black eye as far as like maybe reputation. We took care of it, so we kind of saved it there. But again, should have just fixed it to begin with. Since that house happened, we go through and we redo all the plumbing every single time on older houses. It just makes too much sense. On a lot of these projects, what I'll do is when I submit plans on an older house, I'll try to do a PBI, permit by inspection or inspector. What that means is I could get away with smaller set of plans, and I could kind of expand them with the inspector out in the field. But instead of doing a full set of plans, I could literally walk in to the city, get a permit, leave with that permit, and start. Versus if I have to get a full set of plans drawn out, which is typical of a historical house, but not necessarily an old house. So once I get into it with a historical, I'm probably going to have to get a full set of plans, because it's got to go through a totally different review process. And historical is why hard money lenders usually jump ship. Anyways, just something to think about. You're going to have a lot more holding costs, but that doesn't mean old house is going to go through the same kind of review process. So something you may want to look at to shorten that term is doing the permit by inspection. What I like to do is I like to get the property under contract. And then I have all my contractors and subcontractors come in and give me bids for all of their jobs. This I do during my due diligence period, so I want to know, am I on or off on my numbers of what I was forecasting this job to cost me as far as the rehab. And then I could start getting time frames, and I could get holding costs factored into all of my equations to make sure that I'm going to actually turn a profit. If I'm not at that point, I either renegotiate the price lower during my inspection period, and if I can't, then I cut bait, or if there's still good enough margin in it, then I end up doing the deal. So one of those three things, obviously I'm going to do one of those three things, but hopefully I could get the price down in most situations, or there's plenty of profit in it for me to complete the job. So the key, again, is coming up with a budget that's realistic and that's manageable and doable. What I see a lot of new investors do is when they get into a fix and flip, they have a tendency to, yes, here's the budget, but for a little bit more, I could get this. Better flooring, maybe better this type of plumbing fixture, this type of, you name it. It just goes on and on, lighting to cabinetry to appliances. And pretty soon, all those little, I call them deaths by a thousand lashes, you end up doing way too many different things to where it costs you so much more money. You went way over budget. So again, this is about sticking to a budget. And when sticking to a budget, that's exactly what it is, sticking to a budget, because you will run across unforeseen things that you didn't expect in an older house that you need to make sure that you're budgeting and then have a contingency on that budget. So listen, stick with the budget. It's the number one thing on all of these. You could find things typically that work, and then that way, if you have that uh-oh moment where something is wrong, you could go in and address it and fix it because you've budgeted for that as well. Before I get to my last point, do me a favor, click on the subscribe button below. Follow us for more content like this. Here's the beautiful thing about some of these older houses. They have so much character. Like you could find like at Floor and Decor, some of the older tile that they used, and it goes so good with the era of the home. Some of the older tile that's era correct, and maybe even if you have an old clawfoot tub, you could have those things refinished. I think reutilizing anything you possibly can in an old house, there's so many pieces that have so much charm. I love to try to keep as much of that as possible, like stained glass or kind of the milk door for when the milkman used to drop off the milk, things like that, or mailbox, or as much detail as possible. It's hard to find those type of details in some of the newer houses, so being able to preserve it is a wonderful thing if you can do it. But also by reutilizing some of these things, it actually helps you bring back down your budget if you're in excess in other areas. So here's the thing. We have a checklist for you, and just for watching today, you have access by clicking the link below, and you could have that checklist of items to be completed, and you can start to back into your budget. Again, remember, when negotiating these things, you have time to get in the deal. Factor in, if you need to know how to factor some of these, we have an episode on budgeting and figuring out price per square foot on what it takes. So check out that episode here, and that will help you determine the valuation of what it's going to take to rehab that property. So go ahead, click on the link below, get your checklist of items to be complete. Make sure that you're on budget, but more importantly, remember, you could always get out of the deal, but not into the deal. So use the numbers to get into the deal. Make sure that you're using real numbers, but allow yourself a way to get out of the deal as well if the numbers don't work. You got to get your contractors in there once you get this under contract. Get it under contract, get control of it, and then if you have to, renegotiate the deal.